So, like I said, my guest, Fiorella, needs very little to no introduction, but everybody knows her and loves her. Hi, Fee. Um,
Hi.
can we hear her? Yes, I can hear both Fee and I. And yay, Kate. Thank you, Kate. Appreciate you. All right. So, now we can get going.
Yes,
Yay. All right. Let's switch to
indeed.
Indy Maine. Let's do this. I've been dying to do this. So, the real larger COVID psyop with CJ Hopkins, who has a Substack. I don't know if you know CJ Hopkins. I'm guessing you do. He writes for Off Guardian and he has his own thing. But what he's talking about is how to memory hold psyop. And that Project Veritas, in the larger scheme of things, is look, there comes a time at the end of every psyop when it's achieved its objective, or much of its objective is that it's going to achieve and become increasingly recognizable as a psyop. That's what CJ's contention was. I think you've been saying this for like 3 years now, right?
Yeah, maybe longer, but yeah.
Well, specifically COVID.
Are you referring to COVID?
Yeah. They're talking about, because this is a crucial stage, because at this point, a significant percentage of the public have realized they've been thoroughly mindfucked. Many of them are none too happy about it. Some are starting to ask awkward questions like, why were we deceived and coerced by our governments, global health authorities, and the state and corporate media into submitting into a series of experimental vaccinations that appear to be killing and injuring a lot of people? Or why were we occupying and torturing residents of a Middle Eastern country that never attacked us and never had any intention to attack us, which posed no threat to us whatsoever? It's kind of weird, right? And at this point, it's way too late for those engaged in conducting the PSYOP to continue to deny the facts and gaslight the masses. It won't work anymore, right? So it's time to do some limited hangouts and some whitewashing and little sleight of hand and just generally confuse and distract the public and send them off in various wild goose chases while the official history of the PSYOP is written. See, I love this article because it kind of lays out, and you guys have been on the Convo Couch talking about this over time. And this just kind of hit all the points for me in one short article, and taking it to the end and kind of proving you right in a lot of ways. Like, for example, let's say you're wrapping it up, which you radically restructured society into a pathologized totalitarian dystopia. I love that. That's like your stuff, technocratic panopticon type of stuff, where the majority of the masses went full-blown fascist, mindlessly following senseless orders, parroting official propaganda, demonizing and persecuting those who refuse to conform to the official new ideology. Let's just say you're winding down a PSYOP like that, and what you need to erase from your official history is the fact that your entire PSYOP was based on nothing but fake stats, and because the pandemic you used as pretext was mostly comparable to the medium influenza pandemics of 36, 57, 68, right? I mean, this is crazy. Talk about the new normal, and now you need to erase all that from history. Well, how do you do that? Are you seeing any of this stuff over in Russia, by the way? Are they talking about any of this stuff? Like, what are they talking about with regard to COVID? Are they like trying to push big pharma narratives and stuff?
No, I mean, it's a little bit different here than it is in the United States. But first off, I mean, every single counter narrative needs a counter narrative to that one. So there will always be people trying to co-opt the opposition. I think people like Elon Musk are part of that. They are these supposed anti-establishment figures that are there to really drag people back into the establishment with these fake attempts to make them seem like they're actually challenging the status quo. Same with Andrew Tate, same with all these people. They're there for the quote left and the right to continue fighting each other over these culture wars. And as far as the COVID narrative, it's been entirely exposed. So now, instead of denying what's been exposed, they have to control whatever they can. So that's why you're seeing compromise outlets like Project Veritas come out with things we already knew. We know that Big Pharma makes a ton of money and that they need to have a way to generate sickness because that's how they make their money. And that's been known for a long time. Somebody admitting to that doesn't really tell us much else. It doesn't really tell us the origin of this virus, why it was released, and the fact that there are biolabs in Ukraine, that this has been going on for a long time. There's been movies made before the pandemic that pretty much mirrored exactly how our the 2020 quote unquote pandemic happened, and it was talked about, of course, in Davos, and before that in the World Economic Forums, but prior to 2020. So this is part of that whole agenda, and that is not separate from what's happening in Russia right now with this proxy war against Russia via Ukraine. It's all part of the same type of psyop. If you look closely at what the intelligence apparatus is doing, they use the same type of language, the same type of strategies to get people to fall in line. You go
Hmm.
back to the 2020 election, even before that, you go back to Russiagate. It was used by vilifying an entire group of people, by having, of course, the villain, which was in that case Trump, and then Bernie supporters by extension. And then, of course, after that, the question about Russiagate was discussed up. It's still discussed now to this day. And we had the elections of 2020. We had that. We had COVID, and so every single psyop that's been thrown at people was used by having a villain to blame it on, and then by turning people against each other and making them be the ones to ask for more security. So if, oh, there's so many Russian bots, we need more censorship of online media. We need more censorship to keep these Russian bots away. Oh, we need more censorship from the COVID deniers, and we need more police to go after these Trump supporters who are trying to overthrow our democracy, even though the left was supposedly fighting this establishment before and they were anti-cop. They turned out to be pro-cop because it was a Trump supporter. So that's how you manipulate people. And of course, now where we're at in this whole thing, nobody cared about Ukraine. People couldn't even point to it on a map, but they easily were able to be convinced that Ukraine sovereignty was the most important thing after a quote unquote pandemic and a disastrous economy and inflation and houselessness and just this crisis that the United States is going through economically, that Ukraine was their priority because sovereignty, and we need to respect sovereignty. The same people that said that they were fighting the establishment decided that Russia was their main problem. And it's psychological priming, it's psychological programming. It's this, we couldn't have the success of brainwashing the population against Russia without having had COVID, without having had the elections, without having had the Russiagate and the 2016 primary. We couldn't have had anything that's happening now without having that in the past. And so it's all part of the same thing. And what we're seeing here in Russia is more people question the reality of things. A lot of people are not vaccinated, even with the Sputnik vaccine. A lot of people did not want to get it, especially in inner regions of Russia, in the middle of Russia, and in Siberia. More people are not vaccinated. And also, Russia has come out fully against the digital ID situation that has been pushed by the European Union and, of course, the West. They've fervently come out against it. I haven't seen any forced vaccinations or any mandates that I've talked about people here. There's no such thing as that. And when I was in Donbass recently, we were talking about the global hegemony. We were talking about the global takeover via the World Economic Forum and Davos. That was a conversation I was having with a bunch of people. Some of them who still have a respect at the very least for the Soviet Union. So what you're seeing here in Russia is an attempt to have a a sovereign respect for what Russia is and what Russians are and what people in general are in every country, to have respect for who they are culturally, what they choose to do. You're seeing this in Africa. the ousting of the French from Burkina Faso and from other parts of Africa, the ousting of Europeans, the attempt at neocolonialism once again is failing. And in Latin America, you're seeing the refusals to send arms and weapons and funds to Ukraine by nations that were once huge partners and allies to the United States. Colombia being one of them, for example. Brazil has refused. You're seeing the emergence of de dollarization with an attempt to completely stop reliance on the dollar by creating their own currencies like the SIR. And this is an attempt, of course, via Brazil and Argentina. And so this is not coincidental to what's going on in the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. This is, let's call it what it is, the conflict between Russia and the NATO collective is what's going on. So it's no surprise the United States now needs another distraction for its populace. And in that, we've seen in the last week, of course, the giant, dangerous weather balloon that
The
had to be
Chinese
taken
balloon,
down
right?
with an F-16 or F-22, a ridiculous amount of force for a weather balloon on either end. It's ridiculous, but of course now, as I think a few people may have mentioned this before, a few analysts, but I agree totally. This isn't just about Russia. This is about China because China is a more powerful economy, and China is another nuclear power. And Sergei Lavrov met with his foreign minister Chinese counterpart, recently, and they cemented their relationship, saying this relationship was strong, that it's only going to grow. And with BRICS growing, you're not going to see that relationship be strained. If anything, you're going to see these relationships build in Africa, with the Middle East or West Asia, and with Latin America. And that's something that the United States and Europe and the NATO collective don't want, because that's going to get in the way of this agenda that they have, where they're in control and the rest of the world is just merely a jungle for them to dispose of.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a mess. Yeah. Holy shit, there's so much that you had in there.
Yeah,
So
sorry.
no, that's okay.
Sorry.
You go off on that's what he does. We're talking about Malone, and we're talking about this kid Jordan and Project Veritas, and about the limited hangouts that they're dropping on COVID.
Hmm.
And just how people still are just starting to wake up to it. Like, take this COVID Twitter files. He's ripping at a Lee Fang. How Lee Fang got contacted, and this is what's weird. You're with the Intercept. That's who Musk goes to. Again, I think we know Musk is Intel State. He's got big connections, and he's not going to play around with it. He's been censoring just as many left people. We need Joe back. We got to get Joe back on Twitter. It's ridiculous. He got mass reported by the NAFO bots for posting the Nazi, proving the Nazi content of what's going on out there, and yeah, it's brutal. So it sucks. It sucks not having him. Consent Factory
Yeah.
was making fun of, again, limited hangout, textbook limited hangout. Not suggesting that he or any of them are controlled opposition. No, it doesn't work that way. They're picked because exactly who they are. Because Lee Fang works for Pierre Omidyar, a millionaire working for a billionaire, just like Alex Berenson, and he mentioned Sacred Cow. Glenn Greenwald, who I like and respect, are perfect vehicles for limited hangouts because they're in the big club. Okay, they have limited access, they have exclusivity, and they have some kind of an elite status. They're believed to be independent and adversarial, but what they are is, again, not necessarily that. And I don't know, at times hard to argue with, right? No one has to explain this to them, right? That there's limitations that they put it all at risk if they go beyond certain limits. You
Right.
know that because you've gone beyond
Yeah.
that limit and put yourself at risk beyond that. So I think this is right in line with what you've been talking about again. And if you ask them, they'll tell you that there is no such line for adversarial journalists, not because they're lying, but because they can't see it. All right. I'm sure you believe everything you're saying. What I'm saying is, if you believed it, you wouldn't be sitting where you're sitting. That's Chomsky. Right. And one more thing
Well,
on.
I mean,
Go
I
ahead.
think some of them believe it and some of them don't. Like, I mean, I think some of them know and some of them really don't see it. So I think I
Hmm.
think there's both. You definitely, at some level, you see That's why, like I said, I've always said, if working for RT, I was told I couldn't have an independent outlet, I wouldn't be working for them, because then that, they don't cover everything that I want to cover.
Mhm.
So that's just the reality of network media in general. Once you get that big, there are certain things that, I did a package on COVID recently, well, maybe a couple months ago, and that was one of the few things they've done on COVID. It's not necessarily outrightly discussed, mainly because of the censorship aspects, but I mean, they're censored everywhere at this point. So why does it matter? And Things like that, just like certain things that are angles that are just not going to be covered, but they definitely feature more anti-imperialist views than, and I obviously lend my views than other uh anywhere near CNN, Fox, MSNBC, all these people. So that, like, the Iraq coverage alone, what we're going over now, 20 years since the war in Iraq, is something that the West will not cover ever, because it makes them look like what they are, imperialists who destroyed entire countries and an entire millions of Iraqis with their policies, and of course destroy the lives of American soldiers too, who came back from those wars. This is something Pasta always emphasizes. And so that is true. I mean, there are levels, but I mean, I think a lot more people are more aware than we think. It's just a matter of protecting um your career to a
Yeah,
degree.
my
And
my
I
my
understand,
my
but
worry is still that we're not even close to reaching the normies, that we're still like screaming into a
yeah,
huge echo chamber. And I don't think Elon Musk has done anything to help that whatsoever. If anything, he might have even made it
no,
worse in some ways. All right. But that it's funny that Taibbi, unlike Fang and Berenson, has the sense to steer clear of the COVID part, which is a lose-lose equation for famous adversarial journalists. But this is about Hamilton 68. And this is the thing. And
hmm,
this is what I wanted to point out. And I love this thing. Hamilton 68 was not a scam, and the media didn't fall for it. It was a psyop, and the media participated in it. And if you think I'm
yeah,
nitpicking, you don't understand how official narratives are created and maintained. I wanted to like broadcast this thing across everywhere. Right? That's one of my favorite lines that's been written for a while. They're not created and maintained with magic or top secret mind control technologies. They're created and maintained with words. Words that frame events in a certain way. That you were just talking about this, and are repeated and reprinted over and over by persons and organizations of influence until they become
hmm,
officially what happened, right? And you're witnessing the beginning of that process now. Thanks tweet, just one of many examples, saying the media fell for Hamilton 68. And they were
hmm,
scammed by that clown. All right. No, they didn't.
hmm,
They wanted that to happen, first of all. They wanted to believe it. They wanted it all to be true. Right. The actual PSYOP in which they participated is erased. Right. Their complicity is portrayed as mere incompetence, for which they got
right,
paid billions and billions of dollars in revenue and salaries and bonuses and everything. And this should be familiar to anyone who was paying attention during the war on terror, right? Comparing that to Iraqi WMD PSYOP, which included the same type of limited hangouts and corrections, corporate press, and then of course Julian Assange blew the doors off of that. um, and here's
yeah,
the official narrative. This was the official 2004 correction. Mistakes were made effectively,
yeah,
right? From the New York Times,
yeah, yeah.
right? So
That's
so
but this is what they do. This is
right.
what they do, and that's why I don't buy this Twitter file revelation so eloquently given out to like certain groups, Berenson, because it just shows you that they were handpicked for a reason, like you mentioned. It also shows you what, of course, there's lawyers involved. You don't get to see everything. It's not, direct source. It's not like it was released like WikiLeaks was released. This is
Right.
like you're only seeing what they want you to see, where they're allowing you to see, one. And two, of course, it absolves the corporate media, it absolves the government really entirely of any accountability. The corporate media, if the corporate media fell for it, they were victims. They weren't victims. They're the tentacles of the State Department that is used to brainwash people. They're not victims. They are part of it. And so is the government. Is the government ever going to be questioned for weaponizing? Oh no, but it's a private company, so they're able to, make these deals and blah blah blah, and if they want to do this and that, and so they find these loopholes in the law, and they're able to do very nefarious things to control what people think. The real victims are everybody else that's affected by this, the people who lost their jobs, the people who have been censored or smeared, but more so the victims of the US empire is everybody else that we trample over with with the tax dollars that are going to fund Ukrainian Nazis, and then of course the bombs that are sent to kill innocent people in order to save democracy. So that's the real victimology, but there's never going to be any accountability coming, and this is what people need to learn. You will not get justice or accountability coming from the same people that caused the problems in the first place. Elon Musk's ties to the State Department and the war machine are just undeniable at this point. And I would look to Whitney's Webb's earlier work for that. She's one of the people that's been talking about that for a long time. So have others, including I think Vanessa Beeley did a thing on it as well a while ago. But this is undeniable, and you can't put that aside and say, well, maybe he's one of the good guys, when those ties are clear, when who he is with Starlink, when who he is with DARPA, and where he comes from, and that sort of thing. You can't just put that aside, and people need to understand that any sort of revolt against the establishment, any sort of justice at this point in an empire, in an oligarchy, is not going to come from the top. It's got to come from people at the bottom, the working people, the people who don't really have power, combining their power. That's what it's got to come from. It's not just going to come from a benevolent figure. And Americans, of course, have been brainwashed via this superhero mentality that somebody's going to save them, this Deus Machina, that a god-like figure is going to come down from the heavens and solve all their problems, and it's just not the case. And you're still fed that through Marvel, through and unfortunately, sorry guys if you love these movies, but that's what they're there for. They're there to ensure that you believe that there is going to be a hero that's going to save us all. But the reality is, we're alone in the sense of that, but we're not alone in the sense of combining the effort. And the problem is people are so focused on tearing each other down at that level, instead of really outlining who the problems, who the real purveyors of the chaos and injustice really are here.
100%. So just getting back to this again, just at the point, PSYOP has been subjected to assault. Oh boy, that needs to be. Thank you, Rumble. Hi, Rumble. By the way, we're live on Rumble. I just was checking to make sure that we were, and now I guess we are. Eventually, so even obsessive. Look at that. See, that was the end of the article. Obsessive conspiracy theorists like CJ will tire of writing about it, and they'll turn their attention to less depressing topics. I don't know what that is. That'll be kind of a relief, I guess. Maybe he can be funny again if he can forget about all those dead and severely, of course, injured people. But we have merch. I was wearing this last night. It was really comfortable. And this one too, actually. My daughter was wearing the kitty shirt.